Hello. Today we're going to be learning about something called stem and leaf. And stem and leaf is a way for us to display a set of data after it has been collected so that we can interpret it and understand what the data is trying to tell us. So you can see up here, what I want you to do is kind of imagine with me for a moment a flower stem. And I drew one of those up here on the board. You can see that right here. And my flower stem has 5 leaves on it. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the reason that I drew 5 is because in our data set we have 5 numbers. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 different numbers up there that we need to display in order to be able to interpret. So one of the things to think about with this in order to try to understand a stem and leaf is that the stem of our flower plant represents one part of the number and the leaf demonstrates a different part of the number. So in our situation with 11, 13, 18, 19, and 12, our stem is going to represent our tens. So for us, we have 11, 13, 18, 19, and 12. And so the number that's in our tens category is 1. So I'm going to write a 1 right there on my stem. Now the leaves are going to represent our ones in our numbers. So for 11, we have a 1. 13, in the ones place, we have a 3. 18, in the ones place, we have a 8. 19, in the ones place, we have a 9. And for 12, in the ones place, we have a 2. So if we were to look at this and go back and read what numbers that we have represented using our stem and our leaves, we would know we have 11, 19, 13, 12, and 18. Okay, so thank you for visualizing that with me for a minute. So when we actually demonstrate it mathematically, we would use a graph to do it, not an actual drawing of a stem. That was just to try to get us to think about what the different parts mean. And so that looks like this, where we would have 2 columns. One is labeled stem and the other is labeled leaf. And again, we have the same data set that we had before, 11, 13, 18, 19, and 12. So in this situation, again, we know that our stem represents our tens. We know that our leaf represents our ones. And so we have in our tens a 1. We're going to put that right here. And in our ones, we have a bunch of different numbers. So we're going to demonstrate that like this. In the 11, we have a 1. In the 13, we have a 3. 18, we have an 8. 19, we have a 9. And 12, we have a 2. So when we go back to read this data, we would look at it like this. 11, 13, 18, 19, and 12. All right, so when we did this before, we were looking specifically at numbers that were only in the teens, and realistically, that's not very realistic for a data set. It might be for some, but mainly in data sets, we're going to have a bunch of different numbers. And so I want to demonstrate that as well so that we can have a good picture of what that would look like. So our data set now is a little bit different. We have 11, 22, 18, 18, 25, 36, and 39. So this time we have some different numbers in our tens as well as in our ones. So let's look first at the numbers that are demonstrated in our tens. We have 1, we have 2, and down at the end, we also have 3. Now we're going to go back and look at what would go in with our leaves. What would be our ones category? So for 11, we have a 1. For 22, we have a 2. 18, we have an 8. We have another 18, so we would write another 8. 25, we have a 5. We're going to put that with our stem, that's a 2. 36, we have a 6. We also have a 9 in our 39. So again, when we would go back to look at this, to read our numbers, 11, 18, 18, 22, 25, 36, 39. And before we go, I want to also show you what we would do if our numbers were even larger. What would we do if they were in the hundreds? So for this data set, we have 151, 200, 201, and 156. But you notice our stem and leaf still only has 2 columns. We don't have 3 columns. So when we have hundreds like this, our stem shows up as the first 2 numbers that are in our actual number. So, for example, in 151, our first 2 numbers are 15. So we would write 15. In 200, our first 2 numbers are 20. And these are the same. The first 2 numbers are the same. So we're not going to do another 20. We're going to leave it just like that. And 156. Oh, and we already have a 15, don't we? A 1, 5. So now we're going to go back and do the same thing that we did before with our leaf, which is our ones. And let's take a look at what we have. For 151, we have a 1. For 200, we have a 0. 201, we have a 1. And 156, we have a 6. And we would go back and read this the same way. 151, 156, 200, 201. So the last piece that I want to talk about before we go is that a stem and leaf always has to have a key, like on a map, a little bit, to tell us exactly what our numbers are representing. So in this situation, we might write 15 here. 6 means 156. And that would help us to know how to read our stem and leaf. Thank you very much for joining me today as we learned about stem and leaf displays. Have a great day. Bye.